Hello and welcome everyone to yet another tutorial. As requested by a lot of people, I'm going to show you today how I paint faces. And notice that this is just one way to approach the topic. There's multiple ways. A lot of things influence this, like what other colors do you have on your miniature? How is your overall light situation? Do you want warm colors, cold colors, and so on? But this is a straightforward way you can paint your faces, and I'm going to explain how I'm doing it. So you saw over a base coat of Indian shadow. I'm going right in and I layer basic flesh over that base coat. And the idea behind that is that this is an area that will be really light anyway, and we don't have to bother with applying a lot of layers. Just one opaque layer to establish the light there is gonna be fine, and then we work on the transitions later. Next, I do take a mix of the base color and my highlight color, and you can see that I pull away from areas that I want to leave darker to lighter areas, and that is to not have pigment pool in the areas that are supposed to be shadows. Then you can see I cover all the areas that I previously did not cover, and this is to establish our gradients and to smooth everything out. You see I also cover the areas that I painted with the first highlight color, and you can see that everything gets drawn together a bit more, the gradients become smoother, and we get a smooth result. So this step is repeated. Here you can see I do reapply the lights, and you can see my brush strokes are a bit more controlled, as I want to keep control over where my light goes. And I just re-establish all the areas where we want light. So the forehead, the cheeks, the nose. And as another step in the middle, I do add a bit of a desaturated highlight color, just to have a bit of a color variety in there. In this case I use sandalwood, which is a desaturated skin tone that I really like for that purpose. And the idea here is to lighten everything up again. You can see I am layering on this color. The challenge here is to find the right balance between dilution and opaqueness, to not cover everything that you have painted below, but set up a transition and then later get those gradients smooth again. Here you see the next coat is again basic skin tone. I'm working again on bringing out the lights, and it's a constant switch between establishing the lights and glazing over the whole thing to blend those steps together and then get in the next step and so on. I'm showing you most of the footage that I recorded. I don't want to skip over too much, just so that you can get a feel for those steps as I repeat them here. Using pale skin again, going in, establishing back the light. The next 1.5 minutes shows you how I alternate between layering and glazing to illustrate that further. What we want to do next is focus a bit on the darkest areas of the face, which is the eye sockets. And a good way to work on that has been to create a bit of a blue or a green shadow, as these are cold colors and they work pretty good as shadow colors. I also do hit on the tear sacs just to distinguish that area a bit from the rest, and tint it in a cold grayish blue color. After we do that, the last layer of light, again with some pale skin. Again, using glazes just to apply a smooth layer that blends in with the underlying coats of colors. You can see the gradients become better and better. So next up I'm mixing black with some anthracite gray to paint the base for our eyes. And I don't use pure black on this because pure black stands out. Even if it's used as a shadow color, you always want to mix in a bit of gray. And what I do is I paint in and just slightly around the eyeballs before I go back in and mix more and more white into that mix and bring them back up again. Again, I'm also not going up to pure white because opposite to larger scales, here you're probably not going to see reflections in the eyes, and that's your lightest part on an eye usually, but don't bother with it. Just go to a medium light color that just establishes your eyeballs. And then again with some anthracite gray and black, we are mixing the color for our iris and pupils. And again, I don't go black because it's too intense. A good mix of a color that will stand out and is distinguishable from the rest is fine. In this scale, you really don't want to paint your eyes too intense because that can look weird. It's the result. And if you feel like your results are looking too flat and you want some color variety, there's always the option to go back in with some glazes and bring out some interesting colors. In this case, I chose to go back in with the base color that we picked for the skin. And I just apply some glazes, controlled layers of thin paint, and you can see I move towards the area that I want to be dark so that the pigment pools there. That gives it some extra control. After that, it's a good idea to take your highlight color and fix some areas where you maybe have some spillage or that you want to increase contrast on again. So I'm just using pale flesh in this case. And I just focus on the zygomatic arch. And the front. The forehead. And the side of the cheeks. Now one last thing that I usually do is I go back in and darken the sides and the underside of the face. In this case, most of the underside or the lower third of the face is covered by a beard, but I still want to set up the hair and the contrast, and usually in the lower third you will go for shadow, so blue, gray, or maybe even green. In this case I just use anthracite gray, and the next and last part of the video is going to be about how to paint the beard. My base color is again anthracite gray, just to keep the number of colors that I introduce here to a minimum. You can always choose a more neutral gray. Like I said, stuck to the more bluish gray. Both works. And I just layer on first two coats of color. And here you can also see, just like when you are painting a base color over a base coat, just covering an area twice will already make it a bit more intense, and you can also work with that. Next up, I just use more and more nacre. Nacre is really light gray. It's an off-white color, and I just mix in a few layer colors in between, and again I just cover the areas that I deem the lightest and cover less and less area again. While I do emphasize a few strains, there's no use to paint single hairs. Any single lines you paint, and this is a scale question, is going to be 10 times the size in reality, so there's just no way to get credible single hairs done. So just focus on the strains, and even that I try to avoid. I just highlight areas, as you can see, and have this make a good impression, and usually this gives great results. Okay, last layer, pure nacre, just reserving this color for the lightest areas. And again, I stay away from white because I feel like even on white surfaces that can look odd, and in reality even white surfaces are not always that intense. Last bit of light. Just to tie it all together and maximize or intensify a contrast again. Of course, don't forget your ears, they will catch a lot of light. This is how it looks. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, put them in the comments, and I'll see you next time.